We live at a time in history, in fact, probably there's been very few times in history where there hasn't been a war against women. It's rooted in misogyny, the hatred of women. And what we want to do in this video is look at some of the elements of this war against women. The big picture item is that there are 200 million fewer women alive in the world than there should be. I want you to hear that figure. 200 million fewer women alive than there should be. These are lives that do not exist. These are beautiful lives, lives filled with vibrancy, with creativity, with music, with children that are gone. They don't exist. And it's something that we hardly recognize. That is just part of this picture, however, about the war against women. There's no culture in the world that treats women with the same integrity as men. There are cultures that treat women with more integrity than other cultures. But I do not know of a culture that treats women with the absolute integrity of a male. We live in a world where it's not seen as God's world, it's a male world. If it were seen as God's world, the way we would view men and women would be very different. But we see this world played against the backdrop of maleness, male superiority, female inferiority. Lydia Signori, who I mentioned in the first video, said this: "But still, wherever brute force of the warrior is counted godlike, woman is appreciated only as she approximates to sterner natures." It's the powerful nature, the strong, the stern, that is godlike. This is how, in a man's world, things are seen. And women, with that as the backdrop, do not cut it. They are seen as inferior to men. And thus, the feminist movement, wanting women to be equal to men, means they are to become like men. Because the nature of female, the nurturing nature, is not valued in a male world. The female child is often unwanted before birth and aborted at birth, or simply murdered after she is born. Very often, if she survives birth, she is neglected and malnourished as a child, where the other children in the family are fed first. The female child is fed last. She's denied an education. Very often she's denied health care. She's placed in childhood labor. She begins working as a little girl. And in many households, she is there to serve her brothers. She is taught to serve her brothers. She's very often molested. She's raped. She's sold into prostitution. And she's married at a young age. And very often, she is molested and raped by family members. This is one of the great tragedies. A father raping a daughter, a brother raping a sister, an uncle raping a niece. Very often the female child becomes malnourished or is malnourished as a woman, and often malnourished while pregnant. In many cultures, the male will eat first, then boy children will each eat second, and then the female, whether the mother or the female child, will eat if there's anything left over. They're overworked and under-recognized. They're violently treated and humiliated by husband and by other men. They're often murdered by their husbands or a father or other men in the community. And very often they're abandoned as a widow. This is a painting by a Mexican painter named Mauricio Palacio. And I'd like you to take a moment and look at this painting. What do you see? Often in a society, there's no laws to protect women. And where there are, very often even the men who are abusing women go free. And often the church in the culture, the first institution that should be there for women, who recognize the dignity of women, or who should recognize the dignity of women. Very often the church is silent on these things, and often they are very much a reflection of their own culture. So the sexist culture of the society is too often reflected in the church. Many of the authors that you will hear me quote are contemporary maternal feminists. This is one, a woman named Calais Barger. She's from Argentina. I think she has lived her adult life in the United States, but she was born in Argentina, and she has written a very provocative book called Eve's Revenge. And she says this: it appears that universally the physical vulnerability of women and deep-seated ideas about the meaning of womanhood incite domination in men and self-loathing in women. Men dominate and women loathe themselves because they are women. We see in sexist culture the crushing of women. And there are four key elements of this in sexist culture: the destruction of the family, trafficking in women in the area of reproduction, and even in the murder of women and the female child. And I'd like to look at examples of each of these. First, family destruction. There's two major types of violence against women. There's sexual abuse and psychological abuse. We can't simply think in terms of physical, because there's also psychological abuse. But sexual abuse, you have coercive sex, you have violent sex, you have the man forcing his wife to have sex with other men. And in psychological abuse, there's demeaning language, there's intimidation, there's harassment, there's the smothering of the person, overwhelming the person so she has no place, no space to be herself, and there's emotional abandonment. The opposite, in a sense, of the smothering. There is the detachment, and the man and the woman may still live in the same household, but she has been emotionally abandoned. You have spiritual abuse, the promotion of the spirit of Baal. This is sexist culture, is a reflection of the spirit of Baal. Lack of faithfulness in marriage, where a man will find a younger woman or a woman who's more attractive and just abandon his wife. Or maybe he will continue to live with her, but he has two lives, one with his concubine and one with his wife. Or there may be limited or no spiritual leadership within the family. Then you have economic abuse, not providing for the wife's basic needs, or where the wife works and the husband does not work, or the male does not work, but leeches off of the woman's income, lives off of her work and does not work himself. Often the man will bankrupt the family or create a spirit of economic dependency where she has no place economically. She is utterly dependent upon her spouse. You have physical attacks. You have acid attacks. There are places in the world where if a man thinks that his wife is beautiful and that men are attracted to her, he will throw acid in her face to make her unattractive to men. There's rape, family rape, outside the family rape, and in some situations rape is a tool of war, where the enemy will go in and rape the women of the country that it's fighting or the culture that it's fighting. Female genital mutilation in some cultures, and physical beating. Rape itself is not just a physical thing. Rape is an assault on the soul. The violence of rape is not merely an assault on the physical being, but on the internal nature of the woman. It is an attack on her soul, her personhood, her dignity, her very identity. Then you have trafficking. You have pornography. You have prostitution. You have sex trafficking. You have sex tourism. You can go online as a man and Google sex tourism and get a package tour to go to some exotic place. And you will, as part of the package, have a woman that will be your escort in that place. This is modern trafficking. And you have trafficking in baby body parts. Planned Parenthood in much of the world traffics in baby body parts. There's places where a woman will be induced to be pregnant. She will carry the baby to term, and when the baby is born, the body parts of the baby will be harvested and sold to research labs. There's pornography. And there's two types of pornography. There's hardcore pornography that's violent and brutal, and then there's the soft core pornography, the stuff of bathroom jokes and posters and Playboy magazines and television advertisements and magazine ads. And with the development of the internet, I remember a number of years ago when Poland was set free from the Soviet Union, the first industry that went into Poland from the outside was pornography. This is a billion-dollar business globally. And trafficking, you have prostitution as a career choice. This is something in the United States that is being promoted by certain factions in our government. We should see prostitution as simply another career choice. And then you have sex trafficking across borders. You have trafficking in children. You have bride trafficking. Yeah, in China for decades they've had a one-child policy. And if you can only have one child, what do you want? You want a male. So over the course of 30, 35 years, through sex selection abortion or abandonment of female babies, there are now 35 million men of maritable age who will never have opportunities to get married because there's not the women available. I was in Kenya earlier this year, and I noticed I was out in the bush, way out in the bush, and I noticed up on the hill there were some buildings that were very different than the Kenyan bush villages. And I said, "What's that? What's that up in the hills?" And they said, "Oh, that's where the Chinese live. We're out in the middle of nowhere." And China is building infrastructure all over Africa, roads and bridges and dams and harbors. But one of the things they insist upon in their contracts is to use Chinese labor because they have 35 million too many men in China. So they send them to places like Africa and other parts of Asia. And what do they want? They want sex. So they have sex with African women. And then when they go back to China, they leave the woman that they had lived with and her children there in Africa. So you have this discrepancy. And so you have people in other parts of Asia kidnapping young women, selling them as brides in China. You have Chinese men being exported as laborers to different countries in the world so that China can get rid of its problem of having too many men. You have reproduction issues. You have forced sterilization. You have abortion. And you have female genital mutilation. It is an empty womb that allows a woman to function like an unencumbered male. This is a hard truth. Feminism is not about feminine, and it's not a celebration of female. It's a reaction. Radical feminism, modern feminism, is a reaction to sexism. And when can a woman become most like a man? When she can have sex whenever she wants and not be pregnant. that is when a woman is most like a man. An unencumbered man who can be available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and not be pregnant. And so becoming unpregnant instantaneously is where a woman can have power and become like a man. Abortion is a capitulation to a male-dominated value system. A value system that does not value female. Suzanne Venker is another maternal feminist, and she has written a book called The Flip Side of Feminism. And she said this: feminists are determined to keep abortion as the #1 woman's right, and forced taxpayers, and here she's speaking in the US and Canadian cultures, and forced taxpayers to pay for as many abortions as they can. Abortion becomes a woman's right, because it is abortion that allows a woman to be most like a man. And then there's murder. There's gendercide, and this is the systemic or systematic murder of babies. Baby girls in the womb and baby girls when they're born, or in many cultures, baby girls at almost any point in life. It's gendercide. It's female infanticide and female feticide. It is the killing of a baby girl in the womb. It's honor killing, where there are some cultures that if a young girl is raped, it's not the man that raped her that's punished. It's the girl who is punished, and she can be punished by death. And there's dowry death in some cultures. If the woman does not bring a large enough dowry, her husband will kill her and then marry another girl to get more dowry. In terms of gendercide, in India, in 2001, there were 93 girls born for every 100 boys. And in 2016, it was 89 girls born for every 100 boys. And in some villages in India, you will see boys, but no little girls, because there's so many little girls killed simply because they're female. Barger, again in her book Eve's Revenge, says this: by entering the public sphere at the expense of the private, women legitimate the male world and reject her own. Her own domain, her own being a mother, her own being, her maternal nature is rejected for the nature of the male world. In the modern world, a single, unfettered male is the ideal. And this leads to the crushing of women in its various forms. In the postmodern world, it's different. In the postmodern world, we're witnessing the death of the concept of male and female. And this signifies the disappearance of women. In modern culture, we find the crushing of women, and in the postmodern world, we find the disappearance of women. And in fact, we find the disappearance in the postmodern world of male and female. And we will see this unpacked in a future session. So you have a choice. Each one of us has a choice. We can listen to our culture and what it says about women, and we can say this is how life is and there's nothing we can do about it. You can see yourself as a woman as inferior to men. As a man, you can see yourself as superior to women and treat women as you're inferior. And you can say nothing will ever change in society. It's always been this way and will always be this way. Or you can listen to the principles of God's Word and find that both male and female are made in the image of God. It is not men that are made in the image of God and women are not. It's not a man's world, it's God's world. And when He made us in His image, He made us male and female. That women are morally equal to men. There is no inequality here. Second, you can celebrate your nature as masculine or feminine. Celebrate and enjoy. And enjoy the person who is next to you, who is not masculine but who is feminine, or the person who is next to you who is feminine and not masculine. And you can choose to fight back, to stand against the injustice of both sexist and radical feminist societies.